Live in 3, 2, 1.
Good morning and welcome to the Strategic Planning and External Relations Committee of HART. And we'll start this morning with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if we could do a roll call.
Good morning, this is Danielle from HART. Director Frazier?
Present.
Director Hudson?
Here.
Director Johnson?
Here.
Director Kemp?
Here.
Director Overman?
Here.
Director McLean?
Here.
Director Schistler?
Here.
And then I did want to also note that we do have HART Board Director Melanie Williams here as well, and you do have a physical quorum.
Excuse me, Ms. Arthur, you're difficult to hear.
Is this better?
Yes.
I just said that you do have a physical quorum here in the office, and also that HART Board Director Williams is also present for the meeting.
Okay, thank you. And that being said, we'll move to the next order of business. That's the election of committee officers. And I guess at this point we turn this to Julia Mandel. Is that correct?
Yes, good morning. Oh, can you all hear me? Because I'm also having some technical problems. Good morning, everybody. We do have a physical quorum in place for this meeting, so we can proceed forward to the election of committee officers. So to start, I will call for a nomination for the committee chair.
This is
Gil I would like to nominate myself.
This is Gil Schessler. Nominate
Okay.
Richard McLean.
Is there any other nominations?
Nominate Richard McLean.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Yes, Gil Schessler to nominate Richard McLean.
Okay, we have a second nomination of Rich McLean.
You don't need seconds.
No, you don't need seconds on nominations. What I meant to say is there another nomination?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're correct. You don't need a second. But yeah, what I meant to say, are there any additional nominations? Not hearing any additional nominations. Chair Kemp, we had a discussion during the board meeting as to how we did the vote for the nominations. Since you remain the chair, I will seek your pleasure and how you would like to handle that, meaning we can ask for everybody to just indicate who they're voting for, or we can go through them one by one. So what is the pleasure of the chair?
I think we could just maybe ask everybody who they're voting for. You do either way. It doesn't.
That's fine. Danielle, can you go ahead and just ask for each individual member to name the person that they are voting for so we can take a tally? That might be quicker.
Absolutely no problem. Director Frazier?
Commissioner Kemp.
Director Hudson?
Commissioner Kemp.
Director Johnson?
McLean.
Director Kemp?
Myself.
Director McLean?
Myself.
Director Overman?
Kemp.
Director Schistler?
McLean.
Director Kemp has 4 votes and Director McLean has 3.
With that, Chair Kemp will continue her position as the chair. So now we'll move on to the vice chair, and I will call for nominations.
Nominate Richard McLean.
And I'll nominate, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was waiting to see, I apologize. Are there any additional nominations?
Yes, I'll nominate Commissioner Overman.
Okay, we have 2 nominations. Is there any additional nominations? Okay. Oh, I think I've frozen. I'm not sure if y'all can hear me.
I can hear you just fine.
I'm going to stop my video and see if that stops the... I will go ahead and ask Daniel Arthur to take a roll call vote, calling each member to indicate who they are voting for.
Director Frazier,
Commissioner Overman.
Director Hudson,
Commissioner Overman.
Director Johnson,
McLean.
Director Kemp,
Commissioner Overman.
Director McLean,
Myself.
Director Overman,
Myself.
Director Schisler.
McLean.
Director McLean has 3 votes and Director Overman has 4.
I'm sorry, Daniel, can you say that again, because I cannot hear you.
Director McLean has 3 votes and Director Overman has 4.
And with that, then, Commissioner Overman will serve as vice chair of this committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to have to sign out and sign back in because I am having a technical problem.
Okay, we can continue on, I think, without council here for approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Schisler, so moved.
Second, McLean.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the minutes by Councilman Schisler, seconded by Director McLean. Seeing no further, can we do a roll call?
Director Frazier,
Yes.
Director Hudson,
Yes.
Director Johnson,
Yes.
Director Kemp,
Yes.
Director McLean,
Yes.
Director Overman,
Yes.
Director Schisler.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we'll move to public comment. Now, I don't know if we have any public comment at this time. No public comment I'm seeing. Okay, so we won't do the, what Ms. Mendel, I see that she did read it for the last meeting, and we don't have any public comment. So we'll go right to the presentation for the service development updates. Mr. Coffin?
Good morning, board members. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine, or at least I can.
Okay, excellent. Or I should say committee members, pardon me, although you're all on the board as well. So, appreciate the opportunity to present this to you this morning. We have a couple updates for you. I have combined 3 specific topics that are all kind of interrelated here. The first 2 will be bring forward to you as a request from earlier this year, earlier last year, related to the Service Development and Transit Corridor grant funding opportunities, the applications that we put forward, and as well as the MPO TIP priorities. Both of these, when we brought forward to you last spring, you all had requested that we bring this to you earlier so that board has an opportunity to discuss and help be more of an active part in staffs and guiding staff in how we might want to apply for specific service development and transit corridor grants, as well as the TIP priorities. And then thirdly, we'll talk quickly about the quarterly update for the transit development plan as far as where we are with some of the projects in there. Next slide, please. So first, since we do have a number of new board members, I'll quickly go over what the RTIES is. The Regional Transportation Interagency Exchange application, kind of a long name here. This is really the grant application process for District 7. We have two separate grants that we put in for on an annual basis. The first is the Service Development Grants. These are 3-year grant funding opportunities in which they are operating, that we put in for operating opportunities, and they can be for new routes or funding for improving frequency on existing routes. Now, how this funding works is if you are awarded, you're awarded in the following fiscal year. So what we would apply for now, the funding would be awarded for the next year, and it would essentially provide funding for 3 years, and then the agency would be expected to pick up the funding on a continuing basis, and if it's not working by that point, we should know whether or not to pull it. The second one, transit corridor funding, is more geared at really identifying congested corridors that we can invest in to put transit. In comparison to the Service Development Grant, which is a 50-50 grant opportunity, transit corridor funding has an advantage in that it does provide 100% funding, up to 100% funding, and it can go in perpetuity, but it also can be ended at any time as well. So a little bit of a juggling act there in how we want to place our strategies and priorities for routes. Next slide. So all projects that are submitted, whether it's service development or transit corridor, they must exist in the transit development plan already. So the last TDP that was approved by the board in September through the resolution here, as you see. So any of the projects that are submitted through this RTIES project cycle will be eligible for funding on July 1 of 2022, as that's the fiscal cycle of DOT. So I don't know if you all want to discuss. I think perhaps the best way to do this is to get through all three of these, and we can have a discussion of all of them as they're all related. So our request here is to bring this initial discussion on this topic for you. Next slide, please. As far as the timeline for this, we haven't received an official timeline from DOT on this, but this was last year's, and we don't really anticipate any reason why it would be any different. We're aiming for an application due date of May 15th, so that does give us some time to hone our project priorities and application process to bring back to you and ensure that it fits into the strategy that both the board and Ms. LeGrand has for the agency as well. Next slide. Now, getting into the MPO TIP priorities, how this works is we present, this is last year's list of TIP priorities. Essentially how this works is we present this on an annual basis, and these are our top priorities that we present to the MPO to get into the work program. And what we are entering in here are projects for 5 years out. So every year we are updating the 5th year of projects. Now, that isn't to say that some projects can get pushed up, and you can work with DOT and MPO to sort of move these around in the work program, but it is very important for us to identify what our top priorities are. For the past several years, bus replacements are always at the top of the list, as that's always our biggest challenge. And the CAT AVL and the heavy maintenance facility, I would imagine, will continue to be a top priority for us. But of course, that's why we're here today, to be able to discuss that. Next slide, please. A little bit about the timeline here.
Hey, Chris?
Yes, sir.
Director McLean, I had my hand raised, but I just wanted to ask a question.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that people had their hand raised here during the presentation. So, you know what, maybe it might be better to go through these at the time, and I'll start recognizing, because I see Commissioner Overman also has her hand up, and I had some questions too. But go ahead, Director McLean.
Yeah, mine's quick. I just wanted to know why the lined out item there at the bottom of the document. Automated vehicle.
Yeah, last year it was that's my recollection that we pulled that out of there last year. It was decided that automated vehicles was not a priority on the list. Last year, this was a updated list that ended up going to the NPO after much discussion on the item.
Okay, and that's what I was thinking. So thank you for that. But a follow-on question, and then I'll stop there. Was, do we keep a historical list of those projects that we've either gained or deleted?
Certainly, we can. The NPO does have all of the letters. It's submitted from the CEO to Ms. Alden at the NPO. So we can. I can go back and find as many as I can, and any that we want to look at beyond what I can locate, we can have the NPO help locate those as well.
Okay, I was just asking, Chris, to see how successful we've been with the 5-year forecast, and if this is a guarantee or if it's just a wish list.
Okay.
Commissioner Kemp, this is Cindy Stiglitz. May I speak?
Yes, you may. You're recognized.
Thank you. Cindy Stiglitz, interim CFO for HART. Director McLean, I do have historical knowledge of that. These awards come through, they're allocated by the MPO, but they're awarded through FTA, through the Surface Transportation Block Grant. So I can give a history of that, but effectually we have been getting somewhere between $4 and $8 million a year in those out years. Most of those awards have been for bus replacements. This year, last year, the year prior, we've received $4 million for buses and the vans that you heard about in a previous board meeting. So while the request far exceeds what we're getting, we are getting an award every year.
Thank you. And Commissioner Overman, you're recognized.
Thank you. And this actually relates to a slide that's a little bit further down the way, but I want to start this conversation so that when we get to the slide where we talk about strategies and strategic planning, that we address the issue. Most of this conversation that I've heard so far surrounds the scheduling associated with the State Department of Transportation, with FDOT. However, we have seen most recently a change in leadership and a change in prioritization as far as infrastructure investment by the current federal administration, and we've had to discuss with...
Excuse me, someone has their mic on and there's a lot of noise. Okay, go ahead.
And of course, I have motorcycles driving down the street, so sorry about that.
But I don't think it was your mic.
We have Congresswoman Castro has been successful at bringing dollars at the federal level to to various different transportation or transit-related projects. During the month of February is when Congress, at least normally, in a normal circumstance, during the month of February is when Congress starts putting together a strategy for appropriations for the 2022 year. I want to know what our federal legislative appropriations request is with the assistance of our federal lobbyists for any of these items, and whether or not we are going to discuss the potentials at this meeting or at the next meeting before the February deadline for appropriation requests for 22 at the federal level. Because we've heard from, from the Biden administration, and as well as from the nominee for the transportation, Mayor Buttigieg, that infrastructure investment, including transit, and the infrastructure associated with supporting transit, is a priority. So I want to make sure that we're not late to the game. And I think it's important that when we look at this list to see whether or not there's things on this list that we just didn't have there because there was just no hope.
Commissioner Overman, I think this is a more broad discussion that maybe we can save till the end. And, in responding to that, and it might be something too that Ms. Logran could speak to even at this point.
I absolutely agree, but I want to, since we have the list here and it is part of the conversation later, I want people to start thinking about which on these lists would fit in the federal programs, and then what we need to get behind and make sure that we're using our lobby team to assist us in that process. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. And I just want to, if you go back, and I wasn't going to interrupt the flow of what it was, but I think one thing that might be helpful, and I just want to say, I'll say this at the end, I should have said it, but Mr. Cochran, this is very, very good that we finally have kind of this outline that has never, I've been 4 years on the board asking for some clarity in these things, and so I very much appreciate this was put together. I think what might be valuable on the two FDOT programs that you mentioned at the top, the service development and the transit corridor funding, you did, I think, good overviews of what they are. What might be valuable is to see what is being funded through those two programs at this time. I've never quite understood what funding we have for what at the current time. In particular, when they do the service development grants, which, as you stated, is the 50-50, and then expected for us to fund it afterwards. So I just think that might be valuable, and I don't know whether we'll get that today, but that would be, I think, something valuable for us to know is what has been funded in the past, what is currently funded with those. And as well, I think that there was it might be valuable too, just when you go down this list right here, what the, last year's funding was for any of this. That maybe you could start to give us more of a sense of how this is moving along. But thank you very much. And we can just maybe move to rest of the presentation, and unless it's I think it'd be really good to just hold our questions maybe till after.
Sure, and I thank you, Commissioner, and I can give you a couple updates on those grants that you asked at the end, if that's okay.
Yeah. I'd rather just get through this, and then
I think there's one.
It's a lot of information.
Certainly. Next slide, Danielle, please. So again, currently we'll be updating the 2027 priorities that'll be submitted in March. So what we will submit in March will go before the MPO Policy Committee in April. I believe the deadline will be for March 15th for us to have this list in. So that gives us an opportunity to talk about it today, to discuss it today. We'll have an opportunity to bring it back to you in February and March board, and then we can have a final letter from Ms. LeGrand to present to the MPO, and the MPO Policy Committee will discuss it in April, and then we will again have an opportunity to hone those priorities prior to the board adoption in June for these tip priorities. Next slide. So also what was asked is that we bring forward to you some updates on projects and priorities, again, that were listed in the Transit Development Plan. I don't want to, a lot of this is duplicated here, as you can see why. This is really why staff presented all of this as one presentation. You can see all of these are interrelated, and they really all come back being together in the Transit Development Plan as that being our driving force and our strategic vision and how we move forward. So some of the board discussion here is bus replacement strategy and how we implement that into the TDP. It looks like next year we're looking for a need to replace 59 diesel-powered buses, and what is our strategy moving forward on electric buses. We know that's a major interest of the board. CAD AVL is a critical project right now, as well as the heavy maintenance project, and I think those need to be, staff's recommendation is that these need to be buses, CAD AVL, and heavy maintenance need to continue to be the top priorities as far as seeking funding and tip priorities. That is staff's recommendation, but again, here for the discussion before the committee on that. As far as the CSX assessment, this is the smaller initial assessment. Staff has begun to put together an initial strategy on how we want to approach that assessment, and our hope is to have an RFP out late this spring, and we will have an opportunity to bring forth as best we can within the policy regulations and being able to get some input on the best way to move forward with that from leadership. The bus rapid transit study, the Tampa arterial BRT, Florida, Nebraska, and Fowler. We did hit just a tiny hurdle in that. It's taking a little bit longer to hone the final scope for the second phase with the consultant at this point in time, but that should get moving very, very soon here in the next week or two, so we may be just slightly behind on that study, but that may actually end up lining up better now with the TOD study, which is on schedule. Next slide, please. So some of the board discussion and funding needed here, the network reevaluation, the COA, as we've discussed in the past, there is the final $109,000 that to complete the expansion portion of plan that's associated with the COA, and how we would spend out any additional funding that would have come out of the All for Transportation tax or a potential sales tax in the future. Actually have a phone call with T-BARTA later this afternoon. The idea out of that was that T-BARTA had some planning dollars available, and they were interested in providing that funding to HART to be able to finish out that study. HART was very clear with them. If that was to happen, there would need to be a MOU in place that that T-BARTA that T-BARTA would have to understand that HART would have to maintain full control of that study, that's something that would need to be negotiated at that time. And I know that's probably a concern in hearing that, but that is something that staff is aware of and would be addressing. And then continued service changes, improvements that are outlined in the TDP. Obviously, it's been challenging this year. We don't have the funding as we had anticipated from the All for Transportation surtax. So, we obviously yesterday we implemented some service cuts, which will act as a baseline moving forward for us to develop a network in the vision of the board and Ms. LeGrand moving forward, and we look forward to making that happen. So, again, the timeline for this, we do bring the annual TDP for approval to the August committees and the first September board meeting. The first budget meeting for approval before submitting to DOT, and again, that is on an annual basis. This year will be our last minor update, and then in 2022 will be a major update, which we can talk about a little later at a later time. So that's the update on the TDP, and we look forward to providing another update next quarter on that. So that's all I have at this time. Next slide. I believe that's all I have.
Okay, great. So, and the other thing, did you say now is this a time where you could talk about, just to clarify on the first part of the presentation, the service development and transit corridor funding, especially for me, especially for our new board members, I think,
Sure. So some of I know Cindy's on here, so I hope she can maybe chime in a little bit here too, as she's as familiar with these as me, if maybe not a little more. Last year, we applied for a service development grant on Main Street to provide connectivity between downtown Marion Transit and the West Shore area to provide better connectivity to all the affordable housing projects in that area, and we were awarded funding for that. It'll be essentially bringing the old Route 11 back that was discontinued during Mission Max. So we will receive that funding on June 1st of this year, I believe. But we do not necessarily need to start spending that money right away. But we will have that funding for that route when we're ready to begin operating. The advantage of that route we will also have the overlapping Route 7, so there will be 15-minute frequency kind of in that corridor to be able to get people to downtown. It also provided the ability for the developers of those projects to be able to make the affordable housing a leads project, being that there will be 15-minute frequency in that corridor immediately adjacent to the development. So we're happy to be able to partner and provide the developers with that ability, and of course the route, even more importantly, the service to the customers. And then the Route 275 was a consolidation of previous transit corridor grants, the Route 51, and leftover funding from the Route 20X that was not able to be spent fast enough. So that's where the Route 275 was originally funded from. Now, the Route 275 from Wiregrass to the airport, it did spend more, it did cost more than the grant allotted. but nonetheless, there was grant funding out of those that pot of funding that was applied to that route as well. And at this point in time, I think that's the funding that we have on the books for service development and transit corridor. But we do apply for routes every year. But it is essentially a competitive process. So there's a limited amount of money from the state, and we don't always get funding every year for projects.
So just to ask a couple foundational questions. Those are both service development grants. Those are the 50-50 3-year match and then continue on.
Well, so the 275 is transit corridor, which is the 100% funding. But again, the 275LX actually costs more than what was allotted out of the 100%. So we still pay more anyway.
Right.
But the
in fact,
Route 11
actually what would be valuable, I think, and I know this is too late for this, and I'm sorry, but to have and to also be able to physically see the route, and then also to see the financing of the route, so that we could have a more full understanding, and to see a line that shows where the route goes in our system. I also was and so you said that that's a transit corridor, and then you called it the Main Street route. You said that is a service development grant?
Yeah, so that will be a 50-50.
And that will be with no end. It's not a 3-year.
Correct. That'll be a 3-year grant. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, that will be a 3-year. I'm sorry. I had it.
So service development is 3-year, and transit corridor can be in perpetuity, but also it can end at any time as well.
Right. On Main Street too, it would be valuable to have a map, because I know that, and we talk a lot about Cypress, and I'm thinking Cypress restarted, but then I know on those former route plans, they have this little detour kind of down to Main Street, which honestly never made sense to me in terms of how we go across. But is that, so you're talking, it's like mostly on Cypress from downtown to West Shore, but then it kind of takes a little detour down to Main Street. Would that be kind of accurately describe that route?
No, this one will actually run on Main Street all the way.
Oh, okay.
So it'll go from downtown on Main Street all the way, all the way down to West Shore. I believe it comes out on Lois to Boy Scout, and then to West Shore Mall.
So that would kind of duplicate the Cypress. It would be parallel to Cypress.
Parallel, yes, ma'am.
And it would run at 15 minutes?
Well, it would run at 30 minutes, but what we have is the Route 7 that would run between a portion of that between Howard and downtown on Main Street as well. So between downtown and Howard, with the Route 11 and the Route 7 running in that location, the 7 turns on Armenia now. They will be running sort of opposite each other on the clock. So one might run at 0 and 30, the other at 15 and 45. So people will have buses coming every 15 minutes in that segment. So if they're looking to get to Marion Transit Center and they live in that corridor, all of that affordable housing there, and they're trying to get to Marion Transit Center, there will be a bus coming every 15 minutes to get them to Marion Transit Center, where obviously they have access to a dozen or so routes there.
And I go through this just because I'm hoping that when we go to the board, that we kind of have more of this, contextual picture, context for
Sure.
this and understanding of what, where, and how it serves. And so that's valuable. That being said, Commissioner Overman, you have your hand up.
I do. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chris, for your presentation. And this really relates to what I was getting at earlier. Many of these projects are dependent on state funding, and which we know, based on Florida's economic situation, is going to be a fist fight at the end of the day for any funding, whether it's through FDOT or otherwise. So we are going to have the need to be very aggressive in lobbying for the projects that we need on this priority list for 2022. Hopefully soon we will have some resolution on the surtax, but that may still take quite a bit of time to address, no matter what the ruling is, whether it's a ruling, an adverse ruling, or whether it's a positive ruling, and then what the court decides to do with the proceeds of the tax that has been collected in the event that it's an adverse decision. But at the end of the day, there has been, and this is why I'm bringing it up in the strategic planning meeting, there has been a focus primarily, unless I'm wrong, of focusing on the state schedule, the state funding, as opposed to the federal funding. And it is critical that we have a strategic plan and working with our lobbyists, like right now, for addressing what projects would qualify for federal funding, and then what things have been on our list, to the question that was made earlier about, what things have been on our list that may not be on our list now. What things that are on our list, or what things that are in our transit development plan that would qualify for federal infrastructure dollars. And that information needs to be discussed with our lobby team, not just our fabulous Lorena Hardwick, but the folks that we went through the RFP to hire to help us with federal funding. To talk with them on what is our strategic plan, what things do we need, and what things can we ask them to assist us in getting in line for the funding for 2022. And as I mentioned earlier, that's not happening in June, that's not happening in August, that's happening next month. So I think it's critically important that we, even if we may not have a full plan on how those funds should work, it is critical that we have those conversations with our lobby team for funding, so that we're not late to the game. So of the projects that we've heard about today, what projects do we have within our transit development plan that would or could qualify for federal funds? And when does this committee or the board get a presentation from our lobbyists to help understand what their strategy is for acquiring those funds? And I'll stop there.
Chair Kemp?
Yes.
May I?
Yes.
I want to make one comment.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Overman, for stating that. And absolutely, one of the conversations we had on Friday on our legislative call with our federal lobbyists was, and the proposal that was made is that this week we'll start putting on our calendars working groups for staff to start talking about everything that you just mentioned, basically. And, heavy maintenance facility is at the top of that list, and there are some other projects that can dovetail into that. So we will be moving forward with some of those meetings. I will start looking at calendars so that we can start having some of these workshop discussions with our federal team and really coming together and creating a strategy that we can then share with this committee and future with the board. We also had talked about, having them come and present at the board in March. But of course, that timeline will be dictated as, how quickly we can have these at least starter conversations in the next few weeks.
Thank you.
Ms. Hardwick, and to follow up on that, the next strategic planning meeting is February 15th. Are you helping me understand that we might be able to have a presentation from our lobby team on their strategy and success to date on getting us on the list for appropriations for the 2021 cycle that is normally determined by the end of February?
I think, this is Lorena Hardwick again, I think some of those dates are going to be in flux with the new administration, but we will do our best, and like I said, we will start putting some calendar appointments for our staff so that we can start those working groups this week, next week, and, start those conversations. I can't promise, when we'll have something to share again, but knowing the dates, February 15th for the next committee meeting, will definitely, put that on our site.
Excellent, thank you. Because what I think it's important that the board, who spends time negotiating with not only our local delegation at the state level, but also has relationships with our federal representatives, has an opportunity to work with those individuals to make sure that its HART receives what it needs, or has a strong emphasis on acquiring any federal resources to help with infrastructure and transit investments, because it's not been the top of line for the last several years. But given what we've heard over the last week or so, it is now, and we do not want to be late to the game, and that was why I brought it up. Thank you very much for your report.
Thank you. And I do have another, I think it's an area that I'd like some clarity in that we've never had clarity in, but I think I'm very hopeful that going forward, Ms. LeGrand will help us in some of these areas in terms of having the board understand and work out our priorities and have this in a way moving forward that we're clear on what we're approving and how we're moving forward and what opportunities we have. My concern has been about the purchase of new buses. I've been on the board for 4.5 years or so and have, over and over again, tried to get some clarity on this policy and had not, understood that we were initially, for the first couple of years, doing just fine in terms of our bus fleet. Never great, but adequate with our bus fleet, with the state of repair and use of our buses. And then I started hearing that we couldn't do routes. In particular, I have to say that one of the routes that I really thought for branding purposes and everything else was extremely important was the downtown circulator, and also one of the least routes to do in terms of long miles or that. But started hearing that there were routes that we couldn't do because we didn't have buses in good repair and our fleet was in poor shape, and yet we were doing some routes to Pasco County at our expense, which I didn't understand as well. But my point in all this is I never saw a plan where we were doing bus replacement on a regular basis, where I understood what was available. First, I heard that there was no dollars available and we could do very little. I guess first I heard that we had regular matches from the state, a very unusual something that Florida does that isn't done by very many states. Our state bus purchase was provided through the state, and that's how we moved it along. Then it seemed like we didn't have bus purchases. Then it was like the MPO was saying this, and they would ask for $33 million, but they were never going to actually do that. And it was just something that was put up there year after year, and there was never any funding. So I'm very unclear moving forward what our bus needs are, how we regularly make sure that we at least keep up with that so that we can service all our routes. And I just think going forward, we need to have some clarity, understanding, and some sense of, that, because to me, that would obviously be a top priority. And so I'm hoping that in the future we can understand. It seems like some years there's been little to no bus purchases, and then all of a sudden we can get many. I know some of that's through grants, but I really think we need to have a better understanding about how we move forward on that, what our needs are, and how that is prioritized. As well, I would just say this is for new board members too. Our operations center, when I first came onto the board, they had said that that we couldn't even move forward because our operations center was too limited. It was flooding. There were all these needs. It was critical, and it was a $40 million price tag. And then I really heard nothing else about it until I understood that we didn't get the federal money for it after the fact. And I worked for Congresswoman Castor, so I would have liked to have been part of bringing that or making those requests. I felt like I could have at least done that. We have a very great opportunity now with Congresswoman Castor as lead of the climate change, to your point, Commissioner Overman, and opportunities, I think, federally in terms of with Secretary Buttigieg and the changes that are being made. So I think to understand this in, these areas in the bigger context, but in particular, I would like to understand, and I appreciate again, finally getting the story on these grants through FDOT, but as well keeping track of our fleet, of our ongoing concerns and priorities that I've heard over the years, but then they just seem to drop off the radar, and makes me wonder if they really are the priorities that were stated in the beginning, or how real they are, because we don't seem to kind of have it in an orderly annual way. So that's to Ms. LeGrand for the future, but that's also to staff in terms of our transit development plan and how we look at it, or how the information we receive and how we move on that. And I just feel that there's been such limited information, and then at some point I'll hear it's a crisis. And we need to make, going forward, make sure that we can deal with that. I don't know if there's I don't see any other hands raised. And I don't know, Ms. Hardwick, did you at this time want to raise that issue that you had called about?
I'm sure. I just wanted to make sure that you had all had the opportunity to get through the agenda, but if this is the appropriate time for new business, I don't know if there was another presentation.
Oh, I see. You were going to do it at new business. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I don't see any other hands raised, and this is our only issue, I believe, on our agenda moving forward. So I think we can, unless anyone else has any further comments, move to new business at this time.
Thank you, Chair Kemp. Again, this is Lorena Hardwick, Government Relations, and I will have Chris Cochran, Service Development, chime in and step in to give some background information on a couple of items. I know that our interim CFO, Cindy Stiglitz, is also on the line, as well as Deputy Chief Scott Dranville. The first thing that we'll talk about real quick is the radio communications program. And I'm going to preface it by saying that radio communications is a very important infrastructure project as well as a public safety project for HART, and we are not setting it aside. It is still a project that will be a priority or is a priority for the agency, and we'll be moving forward with it. And that's where, Cindy will come in and talk a little about the funding, and Scott can talk about the project. The reason that it is coming off of the legislative priority for the state for an appropriations request is the way that we managed this particular priority in the last session and how we planned on doing it again this session was going after the public safety funding mechanism. We were originally working with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office along with other law enforcement partners in order to leverage the 17 antennas through the HCSO. So that really gave it the foundation for the project, for it to really be able for us at the legislature and an appropriations request to say that this was a public safety project in the sense that we needed to obtain funding from the public safety side of things so that, we could move forward with it. Not having that relationship and not having the letters of support from all of the public safety partners, because we're no longer in a partnership with them to leverage those antennas, puts the project in a little bit of a perilous situation. And the last thing we want to do, and we discuss this with staff, is put it through an appropriations request, have it go through the transportation side of things, and then we're going to be borrowing from HART to pay for HART at the end of the cycle. So I'll allow for Mr. Drainville and for Ms. Biglich to jump in at this point, just to kind of give an overview of, where this project is, because again, this is a priority for us as an agency.
Yes, this is Scott Drainville, Deputy Chief of Maintenance and Facilities. So the radio communications was just a part of the larger CAT-AVL project that was overseen by a designated HART ITS employee. And prior to COVID, that ITS person has since left HART and that position hasn't been filled. So in the last couple of months, the radio replacement has been elevated to where the maintenance team is taking the lead role in the radio project. But there's really two major questions that need to be answered. Is, what's the best solution for HART, whether it's joining the county or staying independent and soliciting our own RFP, or should we even replace the radio system now, not being a part of that larger CAT-AVL project? We have made this a priority. The team is collecting as much data as possible, analyzing the pros and cons. So we'll have the data we need. We can determine the best way to go. So just to clarify, we do have a 13-year-old analog system. Other than coverage or a few dead spots in the county, our current system is up and running greater than 95%. And redundancy has almost never been an issue. So we just want to really dig in and look through what is the best solution for HART. I've had the opportunity to work in both with the county and without, and there are some pros and cons in each. So that's where we are on that project.
This is Cindy Stiglitz, if I may speak.
Yeah, you're recognized.
Thank you. Cindy Stiglitz, Interim CFO for HART. With respect to the current funding, going back to the TIP program where we talked about being awarded funding on a 5-year outlook basis, we were awarded $10.2 million for the CAT-AVL for 2023. We actually split that into two allotments, if you will, and escalated $5.2 million, which has been programmed for now since 2019 to start the CAT-AVL program. And as Scott alluded to, we had some internal issues that have preempted the project, but because the radio communications is part of it and almost a precursor to it, we are going to use some of that funding that is now in our budget as we speak for the resulting radio communications project. And again, knowing that we have an additional almost $5 million to put toward the entire ITS program. So, it's just a matter of prioritizing the funding that we do have. And at this point, we'll look at utilizing some of that $5.2 million for the radios. I'll stop.
Thank you. And so do we have any further discussion on this at this time? Okay.
I have a question, Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Overman?
Thank you very much. And thank you for the presentation. We've heard, which I'm no longer on that committee, but we've heard about operations and safety and how critically important an upgrade to our radio system needs to be in order to provide safety for our operators. And because I live in a community where we've had very, very unfortunate events, I'm, hypersensitive to this particular issue. I also have a relatively good relationship with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office and meeting with them this afternoon. So I want to make sure I understood what I heard in this presentation is that we had a staffing change, which maybe left a planning hole in the process of moving this forward. And there's still some question on whether or not the partnership with the county, which I'm assuming is the sheriff's office and their towers, there's been a decision not to move forward on that. Can you help me understand what that means and why?
Sure, this is Scott. So there's a few of the questions, like I did work, I had the experience to work with the county before, and one of the operations questions I need to understand is, so we have a dedicated team in HART of 6 radio communication people, and they cover 24/7 operation. So if I had radio issues, say, Friday night, Saturday to Sunday, I don't have vehicles, or do I have access to people that can work on those radios so I have them ready for Monday morning pull-out? So there's just questions like that I have to understand, and how much control do we lose? Do we have to do go through the county for everything we have to do if we want to add a channel? So these are just questions. I need to know the limitations of what there is going with the county.
Okay, and so we don't know the answer to that question, or we haven't gotten clarity when we've asked the question?
Well, I haven't. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm working through all these questions that I have now.
Okay, and were there other factors that led into the decision to not go there?
Well, the decision when the decision was put on the maintenance team to take the lead role, I don't want to make decisions not having all that information. And just some of the research I've been doing, it could cost even 3 times more to HART to go on the county than staying on its own. So these are questions I need to really look into.
The reason I'm asking is because one of the priorities at the federal level for transit is safety. Not only of the people using it, the people that are around it, but also in the area of safety of operators. And so if there is, I recognize we may be a little bit behind the power curve here, but I think it's critically important that if there is a window there that we take advantage of it without assuming that we're going to carry all the cost or only have the funding that we have now. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Sure, and then one other thing I did want to say is, as far as safety, like I said, our system is running at 95% or greater. The 17 towers shouldn't be the only reason we would go with the county. And I talked to the union leadership at our union negotiations meetings, and the main issue is on the power side, really, where they lose, their system drops out, but they lose cellular service too. So, we're looking at short-term solutions also until we can get this completed.
Okay. I'm sorry. Oh, can you repeat where you said the only problem is exactly what?
No, I didn't say the only problem, but one of the major problems is on the power side, on the paratransit side. When they're out and farther out in the county, they not only lose radio, but they lose their cellular service too.
Right. And on paratransit, is that?
Yes, and in the county, so right now we have 7 channels, 5 voice and 2 data. If we went on the county, we would need the data because it's cellular. So I want to make sure that there's no dead spots we don't have cellular service, how are we going to lose it with the county too?
Okay. Okay, any further discussion? Ms. Hardwick?
Yes, thank you, Chair Kemp. So the next part of the conversation is it started evolving on Thursday afternoon when I was meeting with our CEO, Ms. LeGrand, and we started just talking about projects or programs that could potentially have some state dollars, obviously not to say that it's guaranteed, but, could we ask the state for an appropriations request, have a local partnership, and that could also potentially bring in some federal dollars, whether as part of a larger project. And the idea of doing an electric bus with some automated technology was a conversation that had taken place probably the last quarter of 2019. And it just seemed like it was a project that would fit some of the, most of those parameters. And that would be in collaboration and a partnership with DIA. And I know I had the opportunity to speak with all of you between Friday and early this morning, so I appreciate your time. So as you know, what we have to provide for you right now is just it's conceptual. It's a concept of creating a project or a pilot here with DIA, in collaboration with DIA, that would run on the express lanes of the expressway. There is the potential that, this project, obviously it's the electric bus, the automation, very much like the shuttle, the autonomous vehicle that we have on Marion, which it's on autonomous while it is riding in the transit way. Anytime it comes to a light, an intersection, it's taken over by an actual operator. So one of the discussions, and Chris and I talked about this, if the pilot runs on the express lanes, it's already permitted for an autonomous and an automated technology purposes to run on the express lane, but it could also either connect to the airport, or the route could connect to MacDill Air Force Base with an actual operator who would be on that bus at that time, at all times. Again, it's a concept. I know that there are many questions, and we will be working with DIA today just to start pushing some of this information out and writing it on paper. But what you're seeing on this slide is just some very basic data points to kind of get that conversation started. And, what we're looking for the committee here is just to say, if everything aligns, if all the stars, celestial beings align, and we were able to, have some really fruitful conversations with DIA and be able to come up with an idea of this is the next dollar amount that, we could ask as an appropriations request, would we, be able to move forward and be giving you updates throughout this week, and then we would be able to bring this forward to the board as an appropriations request for approval. And I know that we are about to lose quorum, or we may have lost quorum, but just, I wanted to try to be very brief, and that's the end goal at this point, and, letting Chris chime in and any questions that you may have.
Director Hudson has a question. You're recognized, or a comment.
Thanks, Commissioner. I'll be responsible for the loss of quorum in 6 minutes, and so I just wanted to suggest that we move, or maybe make a motion to approve this recommendation. I think sometimes at full board meetings, I know sometimes these committee discussions don't have a recommendation, which I think when we can give one, that's our appropriate role. So I spoke with Lorena about this. It seems like a good idea to move forward with this. So I just want to make a motion before I disappear. Thanks.
Thank you. And Commissioner Director McLean?
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm in line with what Director Hudson just mentioned, too. As I look at this, I think it would be a good idea to pursue. So I would also be supporting that if we do go to a motion.
Okay. And I just have there's been a motion and a second. I have just some questions. So you said out of appropriation, so this is not a member project?
As of right now, I do have this report, and again, just some concepts of representation.
I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty hearing you now.
I'm holding it a little bit closer. Is this a little bit better?
Yes.
Okay. As of right now, I did reach out to a couple of representatives' offices, as well as Senator Cruz's office. Representative Toledo on concept and, the idea that of what we're trying to do here, at least she is on board of sponsoring this. Senator Cruz's office, again, as long as we're able to provide sufficient data, sufficient information, they are also very interested and on board on this. So that would be, those two would be our sponsors, both on the state and the House side.
For a member project, is that like member funding rather than in general revenue?
That's something that we would have to talk through with each of the offices, yes.
Because I'll tell you, I have very much concerns about that at all the regional meetings I've been to. The FDOT has begged us not to do that. And I have taken difference with T-BARTA over this, and as well with and PSTA. FDOT had asked PSTA not to do it because what happens is when it's a member project, and then FDOT is forced to take that out of their priorities, which we've already designated. So it kind of becomes, they have to take out that amount of funding. We have, for 2 years in a row, HART lost $1 million that we should have gotten because of money that went to T-BARTA, PSTA as well. And so there's been I can't support it being a member project in any way. And I just would say that repeatedly we've been asked within the region to please stop doing these member projects, and we've been asked by FDOT because of what it does to the, it directly comes out of the FDOT designated funding pot, so it becomes a de facto priority for them. I don't know if people haven't taken down their hands. So if that, in that way, I wouldn't be supporting this. I also, I don't really quite understand. I mean, I think the best place to put our electric buses are at street grade level, where they're not spewing fumes and they're quiet, and we show them off. So I don't understand exactly in terms of the electric bus, putting it on the expressway as a priority. I understand automated buses really can't work elsewhere because they have to have, they can't work in walkable areas. The expressway has put in place what they can use for connected automated vehicles. But I'm as well, wondering about getting any federal money for a charging station for this project in particular. So I just have a lot of concerns and about the matching and about who would drive the bus, whether it would be, a private operator rather than, our operator, and the funding for the bus, and if it takes the place of if it would take the route that we now have there. So I have a lot of questions about that. But in particular, I would have to oppose it if it's a member project. And so on that right now, I'm just, it can move forward to the board, but I really think we need clarity on that.
And absolutely, Director Kemp, I agree with you, and that's definitely something that, we are working through because, same thing that I mentioned earlier with the radio communications project. We do not want to be in a position where we are borrowing from HART to pay for HART. This would have to be, the funding mechanism for this would be creative, and I know that Senator Brandis at the legislature has been working on some of those things. So again, they are also part of the conversation that we will be having this week to make sure that we're not going to run into exactly what you just said.
Okay, and Director Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real quick question for Lorena. The member project deadline, February 2nd, am I correct on that?
The appropriations, the appropriations deadline is for the House side would be February 2nd.
Okay. I'm going to support it moving to the full board for us to be able to have another conversation on it. I got to tell you, having done these projects myself, I'm a little concerned on how fast we're trying to push this through. A lot of the times, being able to have support for these projects ahead of time before they're even filed is important. And I think that we're definitely going really fast on this to be able to try and make sure we're walking into that door with the amount of support that we need. However, conceptually, I like the idea. So if it will give us a little bit of extra time to be able to put a member project together that has a little bit more detail to it and gives Lorena some more time to be able to kind of get some of the details shored up. I think it's at least worth the conversation. But I have to agree with Commissioner Kemp that there's a lot that goes into some of these member projects, and while it's as easy as filling out a form and getting it out there, there's a lot of sometimes unseen consequences that go along with that from a funding standpoint. So that's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and seeing no other questions or discussion, no other hands up, is that correct? Then we can just move on. I believe that Director Hudson made a motion to move it to the full board, seconded by Director McLean. So seeing no other discussion, do we have a roll call?
You lost your quorum.
Yeah, we lost quorum. Physical quorum.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so at any rate, we don't need to, it can just be presented to the board with that discussion. I find these discussions as valuable as anything, so. And I don't think, do we have anything else, Ms. Hardwick?
That is all I had, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, unless there's any new business, any other new business, then, I'm sorry, Mr. Cochran?
Thank you, Commissioner. I apologize. Just very, very quickly. On note of the Route 7, I did just want to clarify that was actually not a route that was in place before Mission Max. It was a route that we always had planned. It was delayed due to the delay of the affordable housing projects out there. So now that they had moved ahead, this funding will support those projects that are in place. So apologize for the miscommunication there, but I wanted to make sure you were all clear on that prior to the board meeting.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you. And with that being said, I think we can adjourn this meeting. I don't see any further new discussion, new business. Thank you all.